Hello, and welcome to an episode of Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folk tales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, patron of peppers, enthusiast of alchemy and relaxation. I'm sitting here on a beautiful sunny day, and I've been missing recording. I've been having some technical issues. My microphone broke, and then I realized that my software on my computer was out of date. I'm not an IT guy, and I've gotten it all figured out. So we're coming at you hot. We're coming at you heavy. We're coming at you ready to fucking rumble. And today, we are going to be discussing the Loudun possessions, aka the Devils. What is the Devils? The Devils is a 1971 film distributed by Warner Brothers that was buried for over 30 fucking years. I'm telling you, this shit is crazy. I recently watched this movie. If you haven't already known, I've been talking about it in all my recent episodes, and I just had to do a deep dive into the real story because I just couldn't get enough of it. So here we go. So the movie, which was made in 1971, as I mentioned, was banned in some countries. It was banned outright in Finland. It was also condemned by the Vatican, but because Warner Brothers distributed it, they buried it alive for over 30 years. So they refused to even release it for personal release. So it was only coming out in theaters after the soft theater release. They completely buried it. And fun fact, actually, United Artists was the first company that agreed to produce and distribute the film. And after reading the script, they immediately dropped it because it was too controversial. Oh my God. So we are going to dive deep into a rabbit hole of sexual fantasies, alleged witchcraft, lust, hysteria, and so much more. It's a medieval melodrama. This shit is so good. I'm telling you, this shit is fucking crazy. So okay, wait, hold on. Let me just reorganize. Here we go. This scandal in the film The Devils is known as the Loudun possessions. The Loudun possessions. Obviously, if you haven't already been able to tell, this is all taking place in France. Okay, so this is a true story, and our story starts in the 1600s in Loudun. So during this time period, Louis XIII was interested in consolidating and centralizing the power of the crown. And basically, he was really trying to take away local power from local governments and churches. Obviously, something that we forget about during this time period in medieval Europe, Protestantism, the Protestant movement was like alive and well. So there was a schism in a lot of European countries between Catholicism and the Protestants, right? So I think another layer of Louis XIII's mission was to kind of bring the centralization of religion back to the crown, which of course would represent the Catholics. Obviously, here I go sounding like a broken record, but it is very interesting to me how little, I think, in modern day that we forget that Catholicism, and specifically like the Roman brand of Christianity, was designed to have a religious government control of the human population, and by no means reflects the original plan of the early Christian movement. And so it is interesting that we see this play out over time throughout European history and now through global history, that Catholicism really is created as a means to govern people and to centralize government with the mask of religion. Just saying. Okay, So, like I mentioned, Louis XIII is trying to take away local power from local governments and churches. And at this time in Loudun, this city in the 1600s had walls surrounding it as well as a high tower. And so this was obviously to defend from armies or anyone trying to seize the city, right? During this time, cities were kind of like mini kingdoms, especially before like the French crown became a huge mega power. You know, like towns were city states for a long time. So a lot of cities had walls and towers to protect from attacks. And obviously Louis XIII is trying to destroy those. He doesn't want them having any kind of local power. And obviously Loudun has a small militia. So he's really trying to like centralize the power back with the crown. And at a certain point in the 1620s, Louis XIII orders to have the walls demolished of this city. However, this is causing huge backlash in the region and obviously specifically in Loudun, because there is a huge party of Protestants who are known as the Huguenots. If I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so literally like the Huguenots are specifically like a French sect of Protestants. And like I mentioned before, the crown is very openly and proudly Catholic. So by being Protestant at this time is also kind of creating another layer of like clashing with the king. But just to be clear, there was also Catholics living in Loudun at this time, and they also wanted to keep the walls intact, obviously, because it just creates safety in a medieval fucking city. This is like medieval Europe. Are you kidding me? Like, build a wall. Build a fucking wall, okay? Count me out. I'm just sorry. So just like, I'm telling you the real history right now. In a bit, we're going to talk about the movie, but like the movie really struck a chord in me because literally medieval Europe is a living hellscape. Like, count me the fuck out. Count me out, you guys. No fucking thank you. Okay. So here we have like the political scene set, right? Loudun is this city. The king wants the walls teared down. The people in the city don't, but obviously now this is becoming like a religious political issue. And okay, actually, interesting other note. I did mention that a lot of the Catholics wanted to keep the walls up, but of course, there was a group of Catholics that were very pro-crown, right? And so they were actually in full support of King Louis taking the walls down, as they, you know, didn't want to resist and wanted to show their patriotism. And that is worth noting because that's really like a big theme of this story is Protestant versus Catholic, and that's very important to take note of. So now here we are. Sorry, I lost myself in my notes. Okay, so the 1620s roll by. The walls have not been torn down yet because of this clash, right? And truly like a local fight to keep the walls intact. 1632 rolls around. And in 1632, a terrible outbreak of the plague begins in Loudun. And as you can imagine, we're talking full-on hellscape. We're talking medieval Europe, bubonic plague, addiction to Christianity at mega extremes, little to no medicine. I mean, like, this is fucking hell on earth. And the story that we're about to tell revolves around a specific priest living in this area, and his name is Urbain Grandier. In my makeshift French accent, it is Urbain Grandier. Please correct me. If you want to correct me, you can email me at esotericaandnonsense@gmail.com. Thank you so much. So here we're going to call him Grandier, because in the movie, everyone calls him Grandier, 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 Grandier. And just as a fun fact, in the 1971 film, they cast Grandier with the actor, his name is Oliver Reed, and he literally looks like a 1970s porn star. It's fucking amazing. He has this like beefy mustache and this like shaggy 70s haircut. It's so incredible. And he really becomes like a sex symbol of the movie. And through the history, it is clear that he was, in a sense, a sex symbol of some kind in the town. So let's get into it. Who was Grandier? Grandier was a French man. He was born in 1590. He died August 18th, 1634. At the mere age of 44. Brutal. So he was born in the Bordeaux region, and he eventually attended college in Bordeaux. And he studied to be a priest. His uncle, who at the time was a high-ranking Jesuit priest, decides to appoint his nephew Grandier as the parish priest for the Church of Saint Pierre du Marche in Loudun in 1617. So literally Grandier is only 27, and he gets a pretty big title of being parish priest. Now, allegedly his family did come from wealth and status, which is probably why he was appointed this. And just for some context, his father had died by this point, and so he was supporting his mother and his sister. So obviously these are reasons why his uncle like threw him a bone, but like this is pretty young to be 27 and to become parish priest. So already, as you can imagine, this is causing resentment with some of the other priests in the area who are older than him, maybe more decorated in the sense of experience, but obviously maybe don't share the same political status or what's the word I'm looking for? Nepotism. Thank you, me. Okay. So soon after he gets this position as being parish priest, he's also appointed as a canon to the collegiate church of Saint Croix or Saint Croix, depending on how you want to say it. I had to look this up. Basically, a canon of the collegiate means that you're basically like a dean to this Christian educational establishment. So he's like the dean of students now. So now he's a parish priest of a local church, and he's the dean of a Christian college, all at 27. Like this is pretty intense. Okay, so now a lot of people are not vibing with him, and meanwhile, obviously, like getting all this status young and him being openly Protestant, he is very outspoken about some of his disagreements with the Catholic Church. And at the time, there was actually a Catholic cardinal known as Cardinal Richelieu. I don't know how to say that, but this Cardinal Richelieu had written at the time like a short book or pamphlet on celibacy, and Grandier in his late 20s writes a parody of this book, right? So a Catholic cardinal releases a book on celibacy, and Grandier's stupid ass writes a satire of it, and he speaks out about how idiotic it is. And I mean, obviously in retrospect, I think we can all see like the mistake in that, but in another sense, it's iconic that he had the courage to do such a thing. And I'm kind of living, if you know what I mean. Sadly, like all of this wasn't put into the film, and I think that this would be very helpful context into why like his character as kind of a douche, but also as like a cultural and local icon is like crucial, because this is iconic. I'm sorry. I'm kind of living for Grandier. Okay. So While this is all happening, right? So now he's pissing off this Catholic cardinal. Grandier is also very outspoken on protecting the town walls of Loudun, which of course King Louis XIII is trying to demolish. And in writing, he claims that he has an agreement from the king that as long as Grandier is alive, that he will not take down the walls. Okay, so also, unsurprisingly, as now he's kind of like a local legend, he's getting paid very well for his two jobs. So he's rich. And this is medieval fucking France. So, like, there's not really a middle class, right? You're either rich or you're fucking poor. So he's rich. He's also a man of God. He's mocking the Catholic cardinals. He's defending the walls of the city. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's a heartthrob. Women are throwing pussy at him. And it is alleged that women in town were really, really into him. And there was rumors that he was having affairs. Now, obviously, this is partial speculation. But if he wrote a satire on a book about celibacy as a priest, to me it's pointing like this guy was fucking. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's really pointing in that direction. Then in 1629, when he was at the mere age of 39, a noble woman in the town of Loudun okay, sorry, I misread that. In 1629, a nobleman in the town of Loudun accused Grandier of having sex with multiple women in the town, and he beat him with a cane in front of the church in Loudun. And he actually took Grandier to court and had witnesses, like the whole 9 yards. And Grandier was in fact convicted of adultery and banned from his priestly duties for 5 years. However, Grandier had the case dismissed eventually, as eventually the witnesses retracted their statements, and he went right back to doing business as usual. And then in the same fucking year, give or take, so between 1920, or sorry, I keep doing that, between 1629 and 1630, a wealthy woman named Philippa Trinquant, who was a local noblewoman. She was the daughter of one of the king's prosecutors, and her father was also a personal friend of Grandier. So this girl, Philippa, gave birth to a son between 1629 and 1630. And it was rumored that Grandier was the father. Okay, so that just sets the stage. And so that is all happening. So him going to trial and this baby being born that is thought to be his son is all happening just 2.5 years before the bubonic plague outbreak. So I'm just setting the stage for you right now. Okay, so meanwhile, in the local convent, the Ursuline convent in Loudun, there was a horniness epidemic breaking out. So this story revolves around Sister Jean de Agnes, which, let's see, Sister Jean de Agnes, I think. I don't know. If my mom was listening to this, which I don't think she is, she would have corrections for me. Okay, so in the film, they call this nun Sister Agnes, so I'm going to call her Sister Agnes as well. We love the name Agnes. It really sets the scene for medieval France. I'm loving it. So Sister Agnes is the mother superior of this convent, and she is in charge of 17 other nuns who are all in their mid-20s. So all these nuns are pretty young. And a big reason why was because this was a fairly new convent that had just opened a few years prior. And because of Sister Agnes's wealth, she came from a fairly wealthy family. She was appointed Mother Superior when she was, I think, only like 25 or 26. So she's given this convent with all these other girls in their mid-20s. I think at this point, Sister Agnes was a little bit older, maybe in her 30s, but she's still fairly young. And she's in this convent obsessed with Grandier. Like, she is fucking obsessed with him. Now, mind you, it's pretty clear that they haven't even met. But from the convent, she can look into the streets and she's hearing about his reputation. And of course, it's important to remember that he is, in a sense, a local hero, you know? He's defending the walls of the city, and he is mocking this Catholic cardinal, you know, so, and he has a very beefy mustache. I looked at an etching, there's etchings of him online, like little drawings, and he did have a mustache, so you know how the girls get, you know. So, Sister Agnes is sitting up in this convent, obsessing over Grandier. And a little backstory on her, she actually spent most of her life living with a disability, and she spent a lot of time living at home, raised by her aunt. Pardon me. Okay, so I actually looked into what her disability was, and I could not find anything. But all that was mentioned about her disability was that it was something suffered from childhood. So maybe it was like, maybe she had broken a leg or an arm and like never really fully recovered. Maybe some kind of injury or some kind of disease-related disability. So in the film, The Devils, they depict her as a hunchback. I doubt that she was, mainly because I don't think that's something that you can get from a childhood complication, but who's to say? So because she spent most of her life at home, and then as she became older, after her aunt died, she joined a church. And it's very safe to assume, just based off of her living most of her life at home, living with a disability, and then eventually joining a church in her early to mid-20s, it's safe to assume that she has never had any sexual contact. Now, maybe I should like rephrase that. It's safe to assume that she never had any consensual sexual contact, right? Obviously there could have been like a family member or someone older who, like, you know, could have been abusing her, but it seems, based off of the historical records, that she spent most of her childhood not really around other children and being alone at home. So here she is now, in reaching her 20s and 30s in this church. And from what I understand, I don't think it was her lifelong ambition to be in the church. It was that just due to her disability, I guess they deemed her not marryable. And of course, at this time too, to get married, you would have to present a dowry. So as she was considered unfavorable, now she is living at a convent, and her fantasies and her dreams are just being filled with Grandier. She just can't stop thinking about him and his beefy mustache. She's fucking obsessed. So allegedly, or actually this isn't allegedly, this is true, they have records of her autobiography and some of her journals, and she wrote, quote, "When I did not see him, I burned with love for him, and in awe, the present himself to me I lacked, the faith to combat the impure thoughts and movements that I felt." So like, she is lusting over this guy. She's in love. So in the movie, they actually illustrate some of her fantasies, and they are like, they are a little bit wild and obviously speculative, but they're pretty amazing. For the mere fact that I don't think I've ever like been able to put myself in the shoes of a medieval person and like imagine what their fantasies were like. And I do really respect like the creative vision of this film, because her sexual fantasies are very Christ coded. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, her first fantasy of Grandier is him wearing this like long lace gown, and he's walking on water, and she comes down like naked and fully exposed to him, and after he walks on water and stares at her, all the other nuns in the convent are a part of this fantasy, and they start laughing at her because of her disability. And so she's like, she's yelling, I'm beautiful, and like Grandier starts whipping her. And so I'm pretty sure after this fantasy, she ends up whipping herself. And of course, these fantasies are all speculative, but I did find them fascinating because, of course, like if you lived at a time where sex is taboo and you're a nun, so you're not even supposed to be thinking of sex, having a sexual fantasy would, of course, have biblical imagery and content, and you would feel shame and self-judgment. So I mean, if you haven't already been able to tell, this episode is in a sense like a commercial for this movie. You have to watch it. But there's just elements of this film that I haven't really seen captured in other medieval films, which is like, what were these people thinking and dreaming about? And I think we forget that with a lot of history. What were people dreaming about? What were their fantasies about? What were their sex fantasies about, So, oh, and then actually another one of her sex fantasies I wanted to talk about was later in the film. She has a sex fantasy about Grandier being crucified, and she watches in like awe, and I guess she's like pretty turned on, and eventually he comes off the cross and like says some like moving speech, and she licks the blood off of his body. Like it's like freaky. It's super freaky, but hot, right? Like if you all you're doing is reading the Bible all day, like this is like a dream come true, to be in love with like this Christ figure. And like you're like the pain and the torture is all kinky. Like it's all starting to make sense to me. I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to get how our culture has like evolved into what it is today, and how coded so much of the world is in Christianity and sexual repression. So as this is all happening, as Sister Agnes is fucking obsessing over Grandier. Oh, do you hear the dogs barking? Yeah, it's because they're getting riled up. They're getting riled up over Grandier. Okay, so while Sister Agnes is obsessing over Grandier, he has literally no fucking idea. And it's safe to assume that he's actually never even met her in person. She's only seen him when he's like walking through town or giving speeches in the town square. There's no like record of them physically meeting. So he genuinely has no fucking idea of like what's going on in the Ursuline convent. And then eventually the spiritual director of the Ursuline convent dies, and he was this older priest. So Sister Agnes writes a formal request that Grandier himself take the place of the spiritual director, and Grandier turns down the invitation. Okay, so Sister Agnes is fucking gutted. She's gutted, dude. Like there was no question in her mind that Grandier was gonna come, She's been soaking wet every night. So as this is all happening, this is when rumors are getting back to the convent that Grandier has fathered a son and that he's had many affairs. And actually in the film, they take it even a step further in the movie. And in the movie, like he breaks up with the girl who had the baby. And in the film, she's actually still pregnant while this is all happening. And then in the movie, they give him like a new girlfriend who he marries in secret, and so that they can have sex. And there's no record that happened, but I'm just like adding an extra layer to the drama of the film. So now 1632 rolls around. And if you remember, 1632 is the year that the bubonic plague breaks out in Loudun, France. And this is about 3 years after he was convicted of having sex with women and is rumored to be a father, right? So like his reputation is starting to catch up with him. And just 5 months after the plague outbreak, the nuns at the Ursuline convent are starting to go stir crazy. And A big reason why these nuns are going stir crazy is because the walls and doors of the convent become sealed to the outside world to protect them from the plague outbreak. And Sister Agnes is losing her mind. She cannot take it. And so she decides that she needs to share what she has been seeing and the fantasies that she's been having. And so she decides to share with one of the local priests that she's been having images of Grandier come to her at night, and that his image is seducing her and, quote, taken from her what she had vowed to keep for Jesus. Okay, this is just like my own question here, but like, is she referring to her virginity? Because I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to lose your virginity to Jesus. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not how it works, right? Like, if you keep it for Jesus, what does that mean? Like, are you saying, like, you keeping the purity for Jesus, or are you keeping your virginity for Jesus? I don't know. It's kind of vague to me. And I just feel like maybe those were questions that like a lot of like medieval Christians weren't asking themselves at this time, and I'm daring to ask those questions. But anyway, nevertheless, all the other nuns at this time are also starting to making claims that they've been seeing ghostly disturbances at night, and they've been seeing ghosts of the recently deceased spiritual director, but they're also starting to see ghosts of Grandier roaming around at night. So now, after hearing Agnes's experience, some of the nuns are starting to think that Grandier himself had possessed them, while Sister Agnes is claiming that she's possessed by 7 demons and that they were all stemming from Grandier. So a lot of the nuns are thinking that this is the work of Asmodai, which is one of the kings of hell, the king of demons, also known as Asmodeus. And so they're thinking that Asmodeus or Asmodai is working through Grandier to possess all of them. And so naturally, like, the convent chaplain is pretty freaked the fuck out, and this is all very concerning, obviously. So he decides that, like, obviously the only next step is to conduct some exorcisms. Like, you know, it's just like the next plausible option. So these nuns were questioned and exorcised for over a week. And during these exorcisms, these nuns blamed many different people, and they dropped many different names. However, it wasn't until a week into these exorcisms that Grandier's name was mentioned, and he was blamed as the responsible sorcerer for their possessions. And I just want to reiterate that at this point, none of the nuns had actually met him in person. Just throwing that out there. So at this point, the convent chaplain is freaked the fuck out, and he calls in physicians and apothecarians. And this is fucking medieval Europe. So, like, let's take it with a grain of salt of how much these people knew. In the movie, they are pretty disrespectful to who these physicians were. But, like, I can't even argue. Like, I can't imagine that medieval doctors knew shit about shit. Besides the juniper thing. If you haven't listened to the episode about juniper, check it out. So while this is all happening, while these nuns are being exorcised and now blaming him for these possessions, Grandier files a petition accusing the nuns of slander and defamation, and he demands that the nuns be confined. This is so funny because people are still doing this today. Like, they like sue each other for defamation of character. I just think this is so funny. So yeah, Grandier's super fucking pissed. These nuns are slandering his name. But while this is all happening, the Archbishop of Bordeaux temporarily obliges Grandier. He has the nuns sequestered even further in the convent so that no one can even visit anymore or even watch anything that's going on. And for a short while, it seems that the possessions subside. But as time goes on, the nuns start exhibiting, quote, extreme behavior. So it's said that these nuns were shouting, they were swearing, barking, making sexual innuendos. And this drew in a crowd of civilian spectators. And obviously, this was just getting out of hand, and this caught the attention of Cardinal Richelieu. This is the same cardinal that for all these years Grandier has been mocking and openly making fun of. So they have fucking beef, right? And again, I want to reiterate that this is all happening while King Louis XIII is trying to demolish the walls of Loudun. So this is literally taking place, right? Like all of these nuns are freaking out, these exorcisms are happening, and literally within the same time period, King Louis XIII sends someone from Paris to go to Loudun and have the town tower and walls demolished. However, the town militia pulls up. In the movie, Grandier is in front of the militia. I'm not sure if that is true or not, but the town militia pulled up and they did not allow him to tear the walls down. So this man goes back to Paris and he explains to King Louis not only the situation with the tower and the local militia, but he also explains to him the drama that's happening at the local convent and that all of these nuns are claiming to be possessed by Asmodeus, the king of demons, by means of Grandier, the local hotshot mustache priest. So immediately, the king decides to have Grandier arrested as a precaution so that he can't escape the region, and they start to investigate his role in the whole affair. And the commissioner is sent to Loudun to investigate, and he begins to hear stories of the nuns. They are claiming that Grandier's ghostly figure has been wandering the halls of the convent at night, even though there was no way for him to get in. And these investigations continue, these exorcisms are continuing, but after a short while, they release Grandier and they send him back to Loudun. I forgot to mention that when they arrested him, they brought him to Paris. So they release him, but all the while, these nuns are being exorcised continually. And this is over the course of over a year. At a certain point, some of these nuns are being relocated to different convents and nunneries, and they're still showing up to exorcise them. Like, they will not stop. And because Grandier was brought up in the beginning, and because in some of these exorcisms his name keeps being brought up, it's hard for anyone to believe that it's anyone but Grandier. However, like from a more modern perspective, looking back on this story, it's very obviously political what's happening, right? There is a lot of political interest in eliminating Grandier's power, and so they're looking for means to end his career. So after a certain point, it's hard to say who said it, but they have it written down in records that Grandier is accused by multiple nuns of making a pact with the devil and attending a witch's Sabbath. So immediately he is convicted of sorcery and placing evil spells on the nuns and is sentenced to being burned at the stake. They grant him a hanging before the burning to show him mercy, as well as to be able to speak his last words before his execution. However, evidently, as he tried to speak his last words, the monks threw holy water at his face so that his last words could not be heard. That's fucking petty, but also iconic. So, during the execution, the executioner also lights the funeral pyre before Grandier is even hanged, which makes it impossible to hang him, obviously, because now it's on fire. So that leaves him with only being able to be burned alive, which is the fucking worst. And so they light the fire, The executioner steps forward to strangle Grandier, as was custom at this time. However, Grandier's ropes break and he falls into a pile of burning wood and is engulfed in flames, fully alive. The drama, and it's brutal. They actually show not quite the same sequencing, but they show in the movie him being burned alive, and it's brutal as fuck. So after Grandier's brutal execution, these exorcisms and executions continue for another 3 years. So this kind of turns into a short witch hunt. And it is said that Sister Agnes was a big reason of why it stopped. So they kept Sister Agnes alive. And as the years went on, she claimed that one morning she woke up with the names Joseph and Mary inscribed on her inner arm, signifying that the demons had left. And that same night, she claimed to have a vision that she would be freed from the devil if she made a pilgrimage to the tomb of Saint Francis de Sales. So she goes on this pilgrimage, and of course, after her pilgrimage, she visits Cardinal Richelieu and King Louis XIII. And they both claim that miraculously her demons are gone. Yeah. Sure. So like, right, it's pretty clear that like Cardinal Richelieu and Louis XIII just want Grandier out of the way. And a big part of that is to decentralize the power of Loudun as a city. But what's also important to mention is that a lot of historians like claim that different things could have been happening. So like a big example that some historians claim is that like this whole ghost mythology, that some of the older nuns could have been playing tricks on some of the newer nuns that were showing up at the convent. Right? And so like, and of course, like a lot of that could have been fabricated just by the church itself. But I do want to mention something that the movie really hits home that I think is important to think about. And I didn't see any historians really bring this up, that a lot of women living as nuns in convents during this time weren't necessarily doing it by choice. Some of them came from families that couldn't afford dowries. Some of them were considered, quote, like too unattractive or had some kind of handicap so that they were considered unmarriable. There was plenty of women who were sent to convents simply because that, if you couldn't afford a dowry, that's just like where you went. So if you are repressing your sexuality, and you're in your early 20s, like, you're gonna get pretty freaky, like most healthy adults in their early 20s are very interested in sex. And of course, not all adults. I'm just saying, like, percentage wise, like, we can assume that like a lot of these young women could have been having wild sexual fantasies, sexual dreams, and just really want to fuck, And so in the film, during this whole witch hunt and during the exorcisms, like these women are going crazy in the movie. They like take off all their clothes, they're ass naked, they're freaking out. There's like alleged orgies happening. Like they're watching each other masturbate. Like it's fucking crazy. And granted, like that seems to be speculative. Do you hear that? Someone's selling something. Oh, I want juice. I'm going to get juice after this. Okay, sorry. Stay on track, Annabelle. Stay on track. I just, the film did get a lot of hate at the time that it came out, that it was over sensationalized. And in a sense, I do agree. But it kind of checks every box for me because I love a little bit of drama and a little bit of over exaggeration. And I do think it is important to think about what it is like to be someone in their early 20s who's never allowed to interact with men, who might want to be sexually active, and like where your mind could go if you were just stuck inside all day, just fantasizing. Like it could easily turn into like a shared hallucination, or minimum just some sex fantasies that you could blame on the devil. You know what I'm saying? It is Through historical records, though, it is clear that Sister Agnes was definitely fantasizing over Grandier. Even before she like told anyone, she was writing it down in some of her diaries. And perhaps she was coerced to say that she was possessed, but there is no clear way to fully know. And so the film The Devils, so this is where it gets kind of interesting. This movie was put out in 1971, and when it originally came out, it was released in the UK and the United States after a lot of editing, because of course a lot of scenes from this film were deemed as too vulgar. It was given an X rating, so Warner Brothers had the movie edited so that it could have an R rating, and they released it in the US and the UK. And pretty quickly after it being released, the film was condemned by the Vatican. Iconic. And the Vatican demanded that the screening of the film The Devils be canceled at the Venice International Film Festival. A lot of critics fucking hated this movie, and they called it a grand fiesta for sadists and perverts. And many were offended, calling the film anti-Catholic. Ooh, see, and this is why this film is so important, because, you know, the history is always told by the victors, and history is often told from the Catholic's point of view. And as silly as this film is, and as in certain moments like exaggerated as it is, I think this is an aspect of medieval culture that we don't often consider, which was the brutal totalitarian regime of what the Catholic Church was and still is. It was a government. It was a fucking government. And that is how the Roman Empire actually, you could claim that the Roman Empire never fell, because even though now all of these countries have their borders again, as long as the king is Catholic, he is still ruled by the Pope, and the Pope now is still the emperor. Have you ever thought about that? Pretty crazy. So, of course, many critics are like roasting this film. They're calling it too sensationalized. In a sense, it is slightly fair. But what's kind of really fucked up is that specifically Warner Brothers decided that the film was too grotesque, and the British Board of Film Censorship demanded very iconic scenes to be cut out. So the most significant cuts were made by Warner Brothers themselves prior to submission to the British Board of Film Censorship. The two notable scenes that were removed in their entirety was one 2.5 minute sequence featuring naked nuns sexually defiling a statue of Christ, which includes one of the fathers, he's known as Father Mignon, looking down on the scene and masturbating. And that scene is known as the, quote, rape of Christ. Another scene towards the end shows Sister Agnes masturbating with the charred femur of Grandier following his burning at the stake. Yeah, so like that's what I mean. This movie is like fucking off the wall. And so those scenes were cut out flat right before they were even released in theaters, like before they even submitted it to the censorship board. And even after cutting those out, it was still given an X rating. And also, this movie was completely banned in 17 local councils across Britain. It became immediately banned in Finland. And though that it was edited down further and eventually released, it was never actually released onto public release. So it was like never made into VHSs or DVDs. It went through a couple releases, but Warner Brothers tried to fucking bury this shit. It wasn't until 2002, 31 years after the movie debuted, that the director's cut was screened. Warner Brothers had buried the deleted scenes and for years would not let them be seen by the public. And it wasn't until 2001 that Finland lifted the ban off of this film. And throughout the 80s and 90s, there was a couple of condensed VHS releases that were made in very limited release and not advertised. And eventually, as the director's cut became available, there's also a documentary about the film known as Hell on Earth. I've actually been trying to find the director's cut. The director's cut runs for 111 minutes, and I have seen a different version that runs for about 113 minutes, 114 minutes, give or take. So I need to see these missing scenes. I need to fucking find them. If you've seen it, please let me know. Please write in. But this is a real thing. I mean, this is why we need to learn history, because I arguably think that learning about the bigger beats of history aren't as important as the smaller beats, like learning about real lives. I learned so much about France and what was happening politically through the life of Sister Agnes and Priest Grandier. And I think we forget how cult-like humanity is. Not even Christianity, just human beings have cult-like tendencies, and we call it the mob mentality. But if something is deemed normal, we allow it. And the sexual fantasies of a few nuns turned into a full-on witch hunt where they could politically cleanse the local government to fit the needs of the overlords of the Catholic Church. Like, it's a lot. It's wild. Please go watch The Devils. If you like my podcast, please, if you can, give me a nice review. If you want some merch, you can look into the notes of this podcast. What is it called? The bio? What is it called? The show, whatever. If you go into the description of this podcast, you can check out some merch. Please, if you have any personal stories, any topics you want covered, if you just want to say hi, please write in at esotericaandnonsense@gmail.com. I hope that you're taking good care of yourself. Happy Pisces season. I pray for a ceasefire now and forever in every part of planet Earth. War is so last millennia. We're so over war. War is embarrassing and lame. Let us please walk forward with the intention of reconciliation and radical kindness. Life could be paradise. We could all be naked, eating fruit and relaxing. Let us stop feeding the worldwide war conglomerate and live in radical peace and relaxation. I wish you all the best. Over and out.